Hello, this is Mrs. Brown, and today we're going to be looking at types of angles. You're probably pretty familiar with acute, right, obtuse, and maybe straight, maybe not. But acute's between 0 and 90, right is 90, obtuse is between 90 and 180, and a straight angle is 80 to 180 degrees. Some of the other basic vocabulary: congruent angles, that just means they have the same measure. Adjacent angles are going to share the same vertex on one side, but they can't be inside of one another. So when we look these, if we do ABD is adjacent to DBC, because they share the ray BD, they share that side, and they share the vertex B. So those are considered to be adjacent. In this case, EFG, so the big angle, is not adjacent to EFH because EFH is inside of the other angle. So even though they share a side and they share a vertex, you can't have one inside the other. Now, if I had said EFH and HFG, those could be adjacent, but the big angle can't be adjacent to one that's inside of it. Okay, so let's look at some of those angle relationships. Start with complementary angles. Their sum is going to be 90. Now, they may be adjacent angles like this, the 33 plus 57 is 90, or they could be just two angles that when you add them together are 90. So they don't actually have to be adjacent. Some of the problem types you'll get are something like the angle A is a complement of angle B. That word complement tells you that the sum is 90. So you have to be able to recognize that. The measure of angle A is 18 degrees, and then find the measure of angle B. Well, we know that A plus B has to equal 90. So when I look, 18 plus B equals 90. So when you do that subtraction, the measure of angle B has to be 72 degrees because 72 plus 18 is going to be 90. When I take a look, this is another type. Okay, I'm being told they're complementary angles, which means this plus this equals 90. This is a chance for me to write an equation in order to solve it. So 8x plus 4 plus 4x plus 2 equals 90 degrees. I'm going to start by combining like terms. 8 plus 4x is going to be 12x. 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay, subtracting 6 gives me 12x equals 84. And then when I divide, x equals 7. In order to find the answers, I can substitute it back in. So when I do that, 4 times 7 plus 2, that gives me 28 plus 2 is 30 degrees for that angle. For this one, 8 times 7 plus 4, 56 plus 4 is 60. Now, I could have just done 90 minus 30 to find 60, but by substituting it into both, I've double checked that I do in fact have the right measure because, of course, this plus this should equal 90. Okay. Another type of angle that we're talking about is supplementary angles. These are the same kind of idea, but instead of adding to 90, they add to 180. So again, they can be adjacent angles, or they can be separate. And when you have them adjacent like this, there's a straight line. This is also known as a linear pair. And so linear pairs are supplementary. It's a straight line. They share that common ray on it. But it's the same idea. This plus this has to equal 180. This plus this has to equal 180. Similar types of setups for the problems. Okay. Angle C is a supplement of angle D. When you see supplement, that means it should tell you that it adds to 180 degrees. So that's your key word in that particular problem. It gives you the measure of C, and you have to find angle D. So 91 plus whatever D is has to equal 180 degrees. So when you subtract 91 from both sides, okay, you should get 89. So the measure of angle D is 89 degrees. So again, as you're looking at that, if you know the vocabulary, it's a pretty straightforward problem. If you don't recognize the vocabulary, it's going to be very challenging. So these are things that you got to work on, making sure that you know the difference between those types. Okay, so same idea here. This plus this equals 180 because that's the definition of supplementary. So when we do 6x plus 8x minus 2 equals 180, I get 14x minus 2 equals 180. I add 2. When I divide, I get x equals 13. I'm going to go back and substitute it in. 6 times 13 equals 78 degrees. 8 times 13 minus 2. Off the top of my head here, 4. So that's 104 minus 2, which would be 102. And 102 plus 78 is 180 degrees. So I did that correctly. Again, looking at those relationships and writing the equation is your problem solving strategy for a lot of these angle problems. You actually have to think about the relationship, the vocabulary, and then write that relationship. The last type we're going to look at is vertical angles. And vertical angles are formed by two intersecting lines or line segments. And the opposite angles of vertical angles are always going to be equal. So this is going to be equal to this, and this will be equal to this. Okay, so if I get a problem like this, I'm looking here and here have to be, they're opposite, so they're going to be equal to each other. So if I'm setting up this equation, I'm going to set it up so it's equal to each other. Again, because the vertical angles, the opposite angles that are across from each other are always going to be congruent. So this is going to be equal to this. I can set up my problem here. I don't need any other information to solve it. Subtract 13x, and I end up with x equals 6. So I substitute that back in. 14 times 6 is 24, so 84 degrees. And so I can find my missing value that way. If I double check, 13 times 6 plus 6 should be the same thing. This gives me 78 plus 6 is in fact 84. So I know I did that correctly. Okay. The other thing about it is not only are the opposite angles going to be the same, when they're next to each other, these are going to be supplementary because it forms a linear pair. This is a straight line with a common ray coming off of it. And so therefore these two have to add together to be 180. So when I look at a problem like this, I know that this plus this has to be 180 because they're not opposite each other. They're next to each other in the vertical angles. So to solve it, I would do 2x plus x equals 180 degrees. Combine like terms. Oops, I already started to do the division in my head. So x equals 60. And so 2 times x, 2 times 60 is 120. So this one is 60 degrees, and this is 120 degrees. So again, if you know the relationships, you can set up your equation and it allows you to solve. But that's why this vocabulary is going to be super important. Okay? I hope this helps and have a great day.